Namaste, good morning, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our Sunday morning service. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anandarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhritavigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow before Sri Ramakrishna, the stainless, eternal, worshipful Supreme Lord, who took birth in human form out of compassion for all living beings. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this morning, I'm speaking once again on the non-dualism of Sri Ramakrishna. A month and a half ago, in honor of his birthday, which had at that time just passed in March, I gave this talk, but I was very dissatisfied with the way that it turned out, and so I deleted it. But I did want to give it again, because the topic is important, not my treatment of it, but the topic itself is important. Last month, when I gave the talk, I had worked very hard physically at the retreat, and when I woke up on Sunday morning, even Sunday night when I tried to prepare, I couldn't put two thoughts together, and Sunday morning I couldn't string two thoughts together into a sentence, and so it was very disjointed. Not that what I said was wrong, but it was confused. So this morning I want to redo the topic. So basically say the same things, but hopefully in a more cogent manner. So those of you who happened to hear the talk in March, you will recognize much of it. But again, hopefully expressed more effectively this time. So again, the topic is Sri Ramakrishna, or the non-dualism of Sri Ramakrishna and his non-dualism, or the non-dualism of Sri Ramakrishna. So by way of introduction, let me mention a couple of stories of Sri Ramakrishna, a couple of parables that he would tell, which apply to Sri Ramakrishna himself. Parables that those of you who have read about Sri Ramakrishna will certainly be familiar with. One is the parable of the chameleon. He said that there were villagers who were talking, and one of them said, "Oh, by the edge of the village in such and such a place, I saw a beautiful red lizard, a very unusual shape and a beautiful red color." And the other one asked, "Well, did it look like such and such?" And they said, "Yes, yes, but I saw it also on the same tree, and it was blue." And another one said, "But I saw the same lizard, and it was green. There's no question about it. I saw it clearly with my own eyes. It was green." And so they got into an argument, and they decided to go to the tree itself to settle their argument. And there they found that there was a sadhu who slept under the tree. And so they asked him about the lizard. And the sadhu said, "Yes, I've seen the lizard many times. It's called a chameleon. And it changes color. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes red, sometimes green, sometimes yellow. It changes color all of the time. Or it changes color from time to time." And so he settled the argument of the villagers by pointing to the fact that it was the same lizard who changed colors. And the point of the story is that if you want to know the color of the lizard, you have to go to someone, or the color of the chameleon, you have to go to someone who lives under the tree where the chameleon lives and sees it in all of its manifestations. So in that story, of course, the point of the story is that the lizard is God. that people see God in different forms, in different manifestations, in different faces, different names, different qualities. And each person, each devotee of different religions thinks that God as I have known God, God as my religion sees God, is the true God, and all other gods are false. But one who dwells in the consciousness of God knows that the divine being, there's no end to the divine manifestations of the divine being. In fact, in that verse that I chanted at the beginning of this lecture, there's a term which I didn't translate in my translation, and that is Anantarupam, Sri Ramakrishna, who is Anantarupam. Anantarupam has two meanings. One is whose nature is the infinite. But another meaning is he whose manifestations are infinite. And both are true of Sri Ramakrishna. His nature was infinite beyond description. He was Brahman itself, reality itself. But also Sri Ramakrishna had infinite manifestations, which is why we call him Deva Devi Swarupa. When we offer something in puja to Sri Ramakrishna, we say, for instance, Om Aim Eti Gandha Pushpe Sarva Devi Devi Swarupaya Sri Ramakrishnaya Namaha. We offer this flower touched with sandal paste to Sri Ramakrishna, who is the form of all gods and goddesses. That is, he is in the form of all gods and goddesses. And that doesn't mean just Hindu gods and goddesses. All ideas of the divine are find their source in him. So Sri Ramakrishna is the sadhu who lives under the tree and sees the chameleon in all of its glory, and who is able to say that, yes, the Divine Mother is correct, Krishna is correct, Kali is correct, Rama is correct, Jesus is correct, Buddha is correct. All of them are different manifestations of the same inexpressible truth. And he's also the chameleon itself. That is, Sri Ramakrishna himself is identified with Brahman and with Ishvara, the personal God. So he's both the impersonal absolute and the personal God itself, and therefore takes on infinite manifestations. There's a beautiful little handwritten book, not a published book, of course, handwritten, by Bhakti Prana, one of our nuns who passed away at a ripe old age some years ago, a nun that I was very close to. And she had this handwritten book which she gave to me when she was no longer able to do puja. And in that book, someone has written meditation mantras to all of the major deities in Hinduism, but actually the mantra is to Sri Ramakrishna in the form of Ganesha, Sri Ramakrishna in the form of Shiva, Sri Ramakrishna in the form of Krishna, Sri Ramakrishna in the form of Kali, etc. So it's a beautiful mantras to Sri Ramakrishna in the form of these different deities. So there's, I said, two stories. There's another parable that Sri Ramakrishna used to tell about the dye maker. People would go to the dye maker with their cloths to have them dyed, and he had one single vat of dye. And so people would bring a white cloth and say, I would like my cloth a forest green. And so the man would say, okay, fine, you take it and put it into the dye and bring it out, and it would be a beautiful forest green. Someone else would come and say, I would like my cloth dyed crimson red. And so you say, okay, crimson red, you put it in the same vat and pull it out, it'd be a beautiful crimson red. Someone else is saying, I would like a brilliant yellow. And he would put the cloth in the same vat, and out it would come yellow. So a man standing nearby, watching different people coming and asking for different colors, all coming from the same vat, he went to the dye maker and said, I want the color of the dye. He was the wise one because he realized that the dye itself had the power to give all of these colors. And so he wanted the dye itself, not a particular color. And so in that parable, again, it's used to show that God takes on many different forms. The same inexpressible Brahman takes on the form of all of the gods and goddesses. And so the different people come and want to devote themselves to a particular deity. But the man standing nearby who was watching the whole process, he understood that no, there's something deeper here. I want the dye itself. I want the color of the dye, the inexpressible color of the dye, which can take on any color it wants. And so again, the meaning of that was that there are those who like a particular aspect of divinity, and that's fine. They come to the dye maker, to God, and ask for that particular color, and God manifests as Kali, as Shiva, as Krishna, as Rama, as Jesus, as Buddha, as Allah. But there are some wise people who say, no, I want the color of the dye itself. I want the reality out of which all of these have come. So here also, as in the story of the chameleon, Sri Ramakrishna is the dye maker. People would come to him with different temperaments, different attitudes, different spiritual proclivities. And Sri Ramakrishna would give them their chosen ideal and teach them to approach it in a way appropriate to that chosen ideal. And that included people who came to him as Christian. There were examples recorded of Christians, Indian Christians, who came to Sri Ramakrishna, and he led them on their path. There were Muslims who came to Sri Ramakrishna, Sufis. There were many Sikhs who were very devoted to Sri Ramakrishna. And so everyone felt that he was their own, because he would guide them according to their nature, not imposing, as other great world teachers have done. They've imposed a particular way, that this is what God is, follow this, and you will be spiritual. Sri Ramakrishna didn't do that. He saw the nature of each person and gave God to them in that form. In fact, I mentioned just now the Sikhs, the many Sikh devotees who used to come to Sri Ramakrishna. Sometimes after they had been sitting with Sri Ramakrishna, they would get up and leave, and as they were leaving the garden, they would see some of the Hindu devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, and they would say, he belongs to us, not to you. He's one of us. And that was because Sri Ramakrishna was able to speak in the language of each, so that the Sikh devotees felt that he was one of their own. Not that he was a Hindu that we could, we can get some benefit from him. We can learn something from him and then go back to our Sikh temple. No, he's one of us. Mr. Williams, who was an Indian Christian who went to Sri Ramakrishna, he told the other disciples after he had spent some time at length with Sri Ramakrishna, he said, I see him as Jesus himself. To me, he is my own chosen ideal. He is Jesus himself. So he was the dye maker who could take the cloth, that is, the cloth represents the mind of the devotee. And he would dip the mind of the devotee in the cloth and give them their mind with their chosen ideal. But Sri Ramakrishna also, as in the other, Sri Ramakrishna was the man living under the tree who knew the chameleon, but he was also the chameleon. And Sri Ramakrishna is the dye maker who gives the cloth to each according to his taste and preference. But he's also the dye itself. And so when you go to Sri Ramakrishna, you find in time, if you have patience, if you just see the external, what strange looking picture to many people, the picture we have on the altar and altars all over the world, at first it's somewhat strange looking. But if you spend time with Sri Ramakrishna, you find your own chosen ideal. You find your own path coming to you from within Sri Ramakrishna, or you find him leading you along your own path. And so he's both the dye maker and the dye itself. One other thing let me mention about this second parable is that in the story, each one comes with a white cloth, and the dye maker dips it in the dye and gives it to them. As I said, the cloth is the mind, but it's significant that each cloth is a white cloth. We often think that when we come to spirituality, that, I'm perhaps have not led an ideal life, I've done many wrong things in my life, I'm not really worthy. No, each person, your mind is a white cloth. You put it in the dye and it comes out the color of that dye. That's a great truth to remember, that yes, if we put the cloth of our mind into dirty water, it comes out soiled. But if we take the mind, even if the mind has been soiled, it's not like a soiled cloth. We take it to the good dye and put it in the good dye, and it takes on the color of that. So wherever we leave our mind for some time, it takes on that color. So if our mind has been in dirty water, then that's okay. Just stop putting it there, put it in good dye, and in time you'll find that the mind has taken on that color. So that's a very hopeful note for all of us, that all we have to do is to put the mind in the right color, leave it there for some time, and it will begin to take on that color, because the mind is always a white cloth. So because of these two parables of Sri Ramakrishna's himself, the parable of the dye maker and the parable of the chameleon, it's very difficult, or rather I would say it's impossible, to describe Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy and say that he was this but not that, or this was Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy, and make a coherent, logical system out of it. Why? Because reality is not completely logical. Reality is not completely consistent. And the problem with philosophy, and that includes all philosophies, including even Vedanta philosophy, in order to make it consistent, you have to leave things out, because the mind works in that way. The mind works by identity and exclusion. I am this, but I'm not that. Or this is this, it's not that. And to make anything consistent, a consistent whole, a rational whole that the mind can understand and take in, it has to have boundaries. It has to have definition. And to define something is to describe the limits of something so that the mind can comprehend it. The mind can't comprehend the infinite. It can only comprehend the defined. And a philosophy is, by definition, something which is defined, something which is rational, something which is consistent. But reality is beyond all such definition. And Sri Ramakrishna is beyond all such definition. So anything that you say about Sri Ramakrishna, practically anything you can say about Sri Ramakrishna, you can find something which contradicts it. I say practically anything because Sri Ramakrishna himself said to the Divine Mother in his prayer, famous prayer, he said, "Mother, here is your knowledge, here is your ignorance. Take them both and give me pure love for thee. Here is your good and here is your evil. Take both and give me pure love for thee. Here is your dharma and here is your adharma. Take them both and give me pure love for thee." But then he says that he went to say, "Here is your truth and here is your untruth," but he couldn't utter it. Because if you give up truth, then where do you stand? Then the very things that you have said to the Divine Mother, they have no standing. And so he couldn't give up truth. But Sri Ramakrishna, again, was beyond definition, beyond such a person that his philosophy could be characterized within the limits of a book or several books. So some people have said that Sri Ramakrishna was a Vishishtadvaitin. Vishishtadvaita teaches that I and you, each of us, are like sparks of God. God is the infinite fire, and we are like sparks. And this body, this universe, is the body of God. That there are three categories of reality. There's God, they're living souls like you and me, and dogs and cats and plants and bacteria. And then there is physical nature, material nature. So these three categories. And all three together form a non-dual whole. And God is that non-dual whole, but not that God has become matter, but God is the reality which matter depends on for its very existence. And so it's called Vishishtadvaita, which is often called qualified non-dualism, which would mean it's a non-dualism that's somewhat qualified. That is, it's not real non-dualism. But no, what he meant was it's the non-dualism of the qualified whole. That is, that the whole of reality, taking God, souls, and universe, has qualities. God has qualities, the souls have qualities, material nature has qualities. So it's the non-dualism of the qualified whole. And so some people have said that Sri Ramakrishna was a Vishishtadvaitin because he always used to say that when in weighing a fruit in the marketplace to purchase it, you have to weigh the whole fruit, the skin, the pulp, and the seed. You can't just say, I only want to buy the pulp, so just give me the weight of the pulp. No, you have to buy the whole. And so here we have to take the whole reality, God and the world and souls together. And in fact, there's a place in the gospel where he says that my opinion is that of Vishishtadvaita. So some have said that that was his philosophy. But that can't be Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy, even if he says in one place that that is his considered opinion, because everything else he taught contradicts that. I think that what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said that my conviction is that of the Vishishtadvaitin was that he accepted that idea that you have to take the whole of reality. That is, you have to take the unmanifest, you have to take the impersonal reality, you have to take the personal divinity, and you have to take the manifestation of this world, all of that together. But everything that Sri Ramakrishna taught was deeper than Vishishtadvaita, as I will show. Some have said that his philosophy was the philosophy of Shakta Advaita, the Advaita of the school of the Shaktas, those who worship Shakti, the Divine Mother. And that I think is closer. It's not his philosophy again, because his philosophy can't be limited in a particular system. But Shakta Advaita is closer than Vishishtadvaita because, again, Sri Ramakrishna often spoke of the infinite reality, the impersonal reality, Nirguna Brahman, and said that Shakti and Brahman are one. It's like the snake at rest and the snake in motion. And this is all the manifestation of Shakti. That doesn't square with the Vishishtadvaita, and that's why I say that Sri Ramakrishna can't be a Vishishtadvaitin, because Sri Ramakrishna accepted the impersonal Brahman, which Vishishtadvaita doesn't accept. For them, Ishvara, the repository, as Ramanuja defines Ishvara, God, personal God. Ishvara is the repository of infinite blessed qualities. But Sri Ramakrishna didn't say that. He said, yes, as we see God, God is the repository of infinite blessed qualities, but God is beyond that. Sri Ramakrishna fully accepted the impersonal and saw the personal as a manifestation of the impersonal. Also real, because it's also God, but a manifestation of the impersonal. So some have said, and then many of our Swamis who will argue, that there's no difference between Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy and Shankaracharya's Advaita philosophy, non-dual philosophy. But that also I can't accept. Yes, Sri Ramakrishna had great respect for Shankaracharya, and certainly Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy can, in large parts, be harmonized with Shankara's philosophy with a little work. You have to stretch some concepts in order to make it work, but it can work. But if Sri Ramakrishna just came to restate what Shankaracharya had stated, what's the use of his coming? He could have saved himself a lot of trouble, a whole lifetime of trouble, just by appearing to people and say, well, read Shankaracharya's books and you've got the message, and I'm going back to my true abode. That would have been much, much easier than what he had to go through in his lifetime. But he didn't do that. He came to give a message for the times and ways in which he contradicts Shankaracharya. I wouldn't say contradict in an essential way, but at the edges he contradicts Shankaracharya. Is first of all, he said that Brahman and Shakti are the same reality. Now you can squeeze Shankaracharya and get that out of him, but it's not the position that Shankaracharya taught. Shankaracharya generally, though he wrote beautiful hymns to the gods and goddesses, and he established the worship of gods and goddesses in different parts of India and in his monasteries, but for Shankaracharya, Brahman was the one non-dual reality, and in comparison with that, Ishvara was just a part of this phenomenal universe, and therefore just a product of avidya, part of our own avidya. And so again, you can squeeze Shankaracharya and get that opinion, but you have to squeeze really hard to get that out of Shankaracharya. And then Sri Ramakrishna's idea of vijnana, that there's a state higher than merging in the absolute. And that is when you come back and see that this universe is nothing but an expression of the absolute. There's no duality between Brahman and Maya. That Shankaracharya never said, and wouldn't apparently have said that. And so he shared some things a little bit with Vishishtadvaita. And I also think that probably Sri Ramakrishna thought that for many of the people who were coming to him, the devotees of that time, that the Vishishtadvaita is something that would be good for them, something that they could relate to. And he was always, as I'll say later, always trying to make spiritual life real to people, put it in terms that was real and tangible and accessible to people. And so Vishishtadvaita was that for the devotees who came to him. But he certainly was not a Vishishtadvaitin. And though his philosophy comes close in many ways to Shakta Advaita, it doesn't quite fit with that, and it doesn't quite fit with Shankara Advaita also. Close to Shakta Advaita and also close to Shankara Advaita, but not the same as either, because again, Sri Ramakrishna saw the totality of reality. And within the totality, it's beyond all systematization. That's why he would say, as I'll come back to, he would constantly say that reason can't reach God. And philosophy is an effort, I should say Hindu philosophy, and especially the Vedanta, is an effort to take transcendental experience and put it into philosophical form so that it can be expressed to other minds who have not had that experience. But to do that, again, you have to put it in rational form so that the rational mind can understand it. So Sri Ramakrishna would ask people who would come to him, do you believe in God with form or without form? And people would be confused. Well, how could God be both with form and without form? And then they would say which their preference was. And Sri Ramakrishna said, well, that's fine, but always remember that God is both with form, without form, and infinitely beyond both. Infinitely beyond both. What God is can never be expressed. He even said that Shukadeva, the emblematic, archetypical, realized soul of the highest order in Indian lore, that even Shukadeva had just tasted the ocean of Satchidananda. But what that infinite ocean is, no one can say, because once you enter it, you disappear into it. Like the salt doll in his story, who went to measure the ocean and dissolved into the ocean, became the ocean. Then who is to say what about what? There's no distinction there. So today I'm not trying to limit Sri Ramakrishna by saying he was this or this was his philosophy. Rather, I want to point out how non-dualism in some form underlay all of his teachings. And let me just mention before I go on, Ayan Maharaj, now he's Swami Medhananda, a good friend of mine, born and brought up in this country, educated at Berkeley, PhD from Berkeley, but of Indian parents. So he went to India to join the order, though his life had been spent here in the US from birth itself. Now he lives in India. He's written a beautiful book on Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy, published by Oxford University Press. It's an academic book. It's very dense, but it is accessible. It's not one of those academic books which delights in being obscure, but he discusses Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy. And he comes to the conclusion that Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy was so comprehensive it can't be categorized, but he does the best one can do at giving expression to that uncategorizable philosophy of Sri Ramakrishna. So first, let me say, what is non-dualism? When I say Sri Ramakrishna's philosophy, his life, his teachings are founded in non-dualism. Once a friend of mine, Ed Bastian, who's a Buddhist, a PhD in Buddhist studies, and ever since he was a young man, when he came to Buddhism, studied under the Dalai Lama and other great lamas. He has been a Buddhist and a Buddhist teacher. He and I used to both teach at an institute he founded, Spiritual Paths Institute. I taught a course on Hinduism, he taught a course on Buddhism. Other friends of mine, like Cynthia Bourgeot, taught a course on Christianity. Kabir and Camille Helminski taught a course on Islam, mystical Islam. And Rabbi Rami Shapiro, a dear friend, taught a course on mystical Judaism. And so once Ed was arguing against Vedantic non-dualism and expressing the Buddhist idea of non-dualism, and I said to him, it was in the course of a group class where all of the students from the different sections were together and all of the teachers were together. So I said to him jokingly, Ed, how many non-dualisms can there be? And his answer was, no, we mean different things by the term non-dualism. And I came to understand that, yes, he was right. That if there's one non-dual reality, you can't have two non-dual realities. That's true. And that's what I meant. But for the Buddhist, the Mahayana Buddhist, non-dualism means something quite different for us. And Cynthia Bourgeot, a very famous Christian teacher, a wonderful teacher, a wonderful person, she also talks about non-dualism, but she means something different from both me and Ed. And so non-dualism is a word. It can be and a concept. It can be used in different ways. But the point of what I said, which really didn't apply in that context as I learned from Ed's wise statement, my point was that if there is one non-dual reality, then how can you have more than one non-dual reality? For Cynthia and for Ed, they weren't talking about reality. They were talking about well, I won't go into that, but a way of perceiving. So what do we mean by non-duality? We mean in Vedanta that reality itself is non-dual. The Katha Upanishad says, Neha nanasti kinchana. Neha nanasti kinchana. Na iha nana asti kinchana. There is no differentiation here whatsoever. Here, there's no differentiation whatsoever. How can we say that? That's an absurd statement. I've got 5 fingers. Each of them are different. They're different from the palm. I've got different lines on my palm, the major lines and tiny lines. I've got capillaries. I've got veins, arteries, bones, tendons, ligaments. And that's just talking about my hand. And that's only beginning to talk about my hand. You could go on for years dissecting my hand into different parts and different aspects. So there's nothing but diversity here, nothing but diversity. And yet the Upanishad says, Neha nanasti kinchana. And so the Upanishads, in various ways, support that idea that there is no differentiation here whatsoever. Differentiation is only in perception. I perceive differentiation because of my ignorance. If I could see the truth, I would see that there's nothing but Brahman, eka rasa. That's a phrase used sometimes in Vedanta. Eka rasa means only one taste. There's only one taste to it. It's unified, completely, not unified in the sense of bringing things together, but there's only a single reality. And as Sri Ramakrishna says, and again, if you read Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, you'll find non-dualism everywhere in his teachings. As Sri Ramakrishna says, that when there's only one reality, you can't even say it's one reality. Because one brings up the idea of 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, minus 1, 2, 3, etc. also. So if there's only one reality and no other, then it becomes non-dual, not unitary, because the very idea of one disappears. And so that is the reality, which we call Brahman, but Brahman, as Sri Ramakrishna would say, is the only thing in existence which has never been defiled by the mouth. Because though we can say the word Brahman, Brahman itself has no label. When we realize Brahman, it's not that there's a sign there saying you've reached Brahman now. A Kodak photo opportunity, take a picture of Brahman now. No, there's no such thing. The word Brahman is used in human speech, but it doesn't go to Brahman. And so it's untouched by everything, completely untouched by words and concepts. And so the reality is non-dual, not even one, but non-dual. And all of this is a manifestation of that same reality, a reading of that same reality. And so one like Sri Ramakrishna would see everything is just a manifestation of the non-dual Brahman. That this glass, this cup, this watch, this table, this body, everything is nothing but that non-dual Brahman, appearing through the play of the divine, the Shakti, which is the playful nature of the infinite, whereby it appears as all of this universe. And so that is non-dualism. So there's no doubt that Sri Ramakrishna had the non-dual experience. That's recorded well. In fact, even during his later life, when we have a record of his sayings and devotees going to him, and the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and the great master and so forth, when many people came and saw him and recorded their experiences with him, then he would sometimes, in front of everyone, go into deep nirvikalpa samadhi. The photograph which we have on the shrine, and which is usually found on the altars of always found on the altars of the Ramakrishna mission ashramas, the picture of him, he was in nirvikalpa samadhi at that time. He himself said, this photograph shows a very, very high state. And so he, after the instruction of his guru in non-dualism, Totapuri, after Totapuri had spent several months in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, then Totapuri bade goodbye. And then after that, Sri Ramakrishna spent 6 months in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where he was unaware of the world, unaware of his body. Normally, one can't live that long in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The body drops off after 21 days because there's no consciousness of the body whatsoever. And yet Sri Ramakrishna remained in that state for 6 months. So it's necessary to say here that a great soul like Ramana Maharshi, when he talks about Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he and Sri Ramakrishna are not talking about the same thing. That's very important to understand. Because Ramana Maharshi would say that when my eyes are open, I'm in Savikalpa Samadhi. When my eyes are closed, I'm in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And he spoke about a dog in the ashram and said, this dog is always in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But the dog was walking around, eating and so forth. So for Ramana Maharshi, as far as we can understand, who was a realized soul and who was speaking the truth from his standpoint, what he meant by Nirvikalpa Samadhi was the state of one where no idea, no desire arises in the mind. But there could be the appearance of the world, but no identity with it. And so there's no sense of identity with the world, even when the world appears. But when Sri Ramakrishna spoke of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, he meant that particular state when the mind has been absorbed back into Brahman and there is no functioning mind. The mind has dissolved into Brahman. And so there is no world, no perception of the world. The body doesn't speak. The body doesn't walk. The body can't eat. There's no breathing. Doctors tested Sri Ramakrishna at times when he was in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. They could detect no heartbeat, no vital signs, no breath. They could touch his eyeball and there would be no reaction. The eyelid wouldn't blink. There was no response. That was what he meant, and what is traditionally meant by Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So that was not what Ramana Maharshi meant when he spoke of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That's very important for understanding. So after he had spent 6 months in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when he came back to normal consciousness, it wasn't what we call normal consciousness, it was still super consciousness, but where once again he saw the world, but saw it from the standpoint of non-duality. And so he said for some time after that experience, if he were served with a plate with different dishes, as they serve in India, with the little batis with different dishes on a big a brass or stainless steel plate. In his day, it would have been a brass plate, bell metal. He said that he couldn't eat the different dishes. In order to eat, he had to put everything together and mix it up, because his mind was so unified that thinking about diversity, his mind wouldn't go there. His mind was so unified that it wouldn't go into diversity. So even in matters of eating, the state was so extreme that even in matters of eating, he had to put all food into one dish and mix it together into a unified, what we would call mess. That's all. That's the only way he could eat. And so, and then afterwards, of course, there were times when he was so identified with everything that when one boatman was beating another boatman, Sri Ramakrishna cried out in pain and had welts on his back from the beating that the boatman received. But he was so identified that the welts showed up on his own back. And when he saw someone walking across the grass, he screamed out in pain because he was so identified with it that it was as if the person was walking on his own chest. Obviously, that type of identification one can't stay in for long. There's a particular term for that vision, and I can't remember the name of that vision. I've only seen it once mentioned, and that was 47 years ago, probably. And I don't remember it now. But there is a name for that kind of vision. And it said that one can't, if one has that vision, one can't last in the body long. The body disappears. No problem for the person whose body disappears, because they have become identified with reality and they remain identified with reality. But the body can't bear that kind of state. Naturally, we can understand that it couldn't. So Sri Ramakrishna was immersed in the non-dual experience. And afterwards, you find that his teachings are full of that. Again and again, he refers to non-dualism as true and expresses non-dualism in various ways. So Swami Vivekananda used to say that Sri Ramakrishna was all devotion outside, but inside he was pure knowledge. Whereas with himself, Swami Vivekananda said, I am all knowledge outside, but inside I'm pure devotion. So we won't go into Swami Vivekananda, what he meant about himself, but what he meant about Sri Ramakrishna we can see. Sri Ramakrishna said the same thing about Sri Chaitanya. That Sri Chaitanya, the great incarnation of God from Nadia, Bengal, who is the figurehead, the founder, not in a formal sense, but the Bengal school of Vaishnavism, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they trace their descent from Sri Chaitanya. As do a branch of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the ISKCON, or Krishna consciousness. So Sri Ramakrishna said that Sri Chaitanya, who taught ecstatic love for God, never taught non-dualism, he always taught ecstatic love for God, at least as far as we know from the record. But Sri Ramakrishna said that Sri Chaitanya lived in the consciousness of non-duality, but he was like the elephant who had two sets of teeth, the set within the mouth and then the tusks. He said the tusks of the elephant are for fighting with others. And so Sri Chaitanya, his devotion, ecstatic devotion, was for the public, for teaching the public. But inside he was always enjoying, with the inner set of teeth, as it were, always enjoying the consciousness of non-duality. And so Sri Ramakrishna was the same. And you see in Sri Ramakrishna's life that intense devotion to truth that incredible ability to analyze any situation, the ability to see into the heart and the truth of anything, the ability to hold on to the truth no matter what, the ability to reduce every practice, every idea to a tangible practice. And from his very childhood, if people scolded him and told him that he shouldn't do a certain thing, he wouldn't obey unless he understood why. So his father quickly learned that if he explained to Sri Ramakrishna, and his mother learned also, that if they explained to the boy the reason for something, then he would adhere to it. But he had to know the reason for it. And so that intense dedication to truth, he didn't like book learning, but that also was because of that inner knowledge that he had. He didn't like the what he called bundling of rice and plantain education. He saw that education was meant for teaching people how to deal with the world so that they could make a living, so they could grow up and be part of functioning members of society and make a living. He had no use for that. He wanted only that knowledge. He said, I want that knowledge which my father had, that knowledge which will lead me to God, nothing else. And so again, in many ways, you see that his orientation was towards supreme knowledge all of the time, always towards principle, always towards understanding, always towards analysis. And yet, the expression in Sri Ramakrishna was devotional. And what about his teaching of non-dualism? Well, first of all, there's a story I'll relate about Holy Mother, which ties into Sri Ramakrishna's non-dualism. Some of you know it, some of you want to know it. When Swami Vivekananda established the Advaitashrama at Mayavati, he established it for the practice and propagation of non-dualism alone, Advaita alone. So it's called the Advaitashrama. And he wanted it dedicated only to the philosophy and practice of Advaita, the impersonal path of knowledge. But when he went to Mayavati, it had been founded by his disciples, English and Indian. When he went to Mayavati on his second return from the West in 1901, January 1901, in fact, he passed January 1st, 1901, on the path to Mayavati in the cold and the snow. When he got there, he found that some of his own disciples, Swami Vimalananda, Swami Virajananda, one or two others, that they had set up an altar to Sri Ramakrishna and they were doing daily puja to the picture of Sri Ramakrishna. And so that evening, when everyone was gathered around the Swami to hear him talk, to hear his illuminating conversation, he spoke very strongly about his disappointment to find that the worship had been established in a place he had founded for the practice of Advaita alone. He later said that I saw that the old man had come even to Advaitashrama, meaning Sri Ramakrishna. And so Swami Virajananda and others, they stopped participating, realizing that Swamiji didn't want it. But Swamiji didn't say, dismantle the shrine, don't do it. He just expressed his great disappointment that they were doing it. And so others stopped it, but Swami Vimalananda, who was a sannyasi disciple of Swamiji, but a mantra disciple of the Holy Mother, he continued. In fact, he even continued till after Swamiji's death in 1902. Then he wrote in a letter, I think it was in 1903, addressed to Holy Mother. At least Holy Mother's reply is dated 1903. He wrote to her explaining the situation, that I've been doing the puja to Sri Ramakrishna here. I find great joy in it. Swamiji criticized the practice. He was very upset with it, but he didn't tell me to dismantle the shrine. And so he naturally thought, we can feel sure, that Holy Mother, who did daily puja to Sri Ramakrishna, who looked on Sri Ramakrishna as God himself, she would support his practice of non-dualism, his practice of devotion and his worship of Sri Ramakrishna. But instead of that, she wrote a very strong letter, uncharacteristically strong. When she needed to, Holy Mother could be extremely strong on principle. And in this letter, she was extremely strong. She wrote in Bengali, of course. She says, Rami jor korite bolite pari. I can say with great force that Sri Ramakrishna was all Advaita. You are his disciples, you meaning followers, you are his followers, you also are all Advaita. What Naren has done, Swami Vivekananda has done, that is right. And so she gave no quarter to him. Said that no, Sri Ramakrishna was all Advaita. All that he taught was Advaita. You are his followers, you also are Advaitins. And so she said it in categorical language, where there was no way to, she left no wiggle room at all. And so then Swami Vimalananda also stopped the worship. And since then, there's been no worship at Mayavati. So again, the Holy Mother herself, as she did in several critical points in the life of the movement after Sri Ramakrishna passed away, she stood up and said that this is this. She did that over and over again for Swami Vivekananda, that no, what Naren is doing, what he is teaching is right. Those are the words of Sri Ramakrishna coming out of Naren's mouth. And so it was because of Holy Mother that other disciples who doubted Swamiji, whose teachings sounded so different from what they had heard from Sri Ramakrishna, that they came into line. And one of the things that sounded so different was, again, Sri Ramakrishna spoke about devotion. He used to say that Narada's bhakti, path of bhakti, is the path for the present age. And here Swami Vivekananda was teaching non-dualism, Advaita, Jnana Yoga to one and all, even to mlechas, the barbarians of the West, like us. Even to us, he was teaching. It wasn't even to be taught to Indians who were not monastic or leading an ideal life. And here he was teaching one and all around the world, even to the barbarians in the West. And so they thought, no, this can't be Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. Naren has gone astray. But Holy Mother said, no, it's Sri Ramakrishna himself who is speaking through Naren. So let me say, I've addressed this in another class a 2-3 weeks ago, but let me address it again here. Why there was that difference? Why Sri Ramakrishna taught bhakti to most, and Swami Vivekananda taught Jnana Yoga to all. He also taught devotion. He gave great emphasis to devotion as well, but he taught non-dualism even as the foundation of devotion. So Sri Ramakrishna was concerned with the practical spiritual life of the people in front of him. The teachings that we see in the gospel, he was speaking to actual people that he was giving them what they needed for their path. And even when he said that Narada Bhakti is the path for the modern age, I think we have to take that as meaning for the majority of people. Because yes, the majority of people don't take to non-dualism. They don't. It doesn't appeal, and it doesn't register. But most people in the world, including most lay Buddhists, are devotional by nature. That's why, except for among the monks, you find most Buddhists spend their time worshiping the Buddha and praying to the Buddha. So Sri Ramakrishna was teaching people, and he always insisted on making spiritual life real, something that has reality to you. And so he was always advising against taking up concepts that you could not embody, that you could not take hold of. Take something that is real to you and work with that. And if, as he said, if you need non-dualism, then God himself will show that to you. But take up something that you can understand and do that. Whereas Swami Vivekananda's task was different. Swami Vivekananda was Sri Ramakrishna's message to the whole world and to the future. And Swamiji's task was to take the tremendous spiritual power Sri Ramakrishna had generated through his practice and his realizations and direct it for the future well-being of the whole world, not just for spiritual people, for everybody. Not just for religious people, not just for Hindus, but for everyone in the world, to give it direction. And Swamiji saw that the old ideas of religion had run their course, and they were beginning to become toxic. The idea that you are all sinners, that you are all weak, that you can't do anything on your own. And so as he said, Swamiji speaking, I want to run an experiment. That is, he said in San Francisco in 1900 that he wanted to run an experiment of teaching the divinity to all. He said, if it's true that everyone is one with God even now, even in their ignorance, then give it to people. In the beginning, it may cause some confusion, but in the end, it will do good. So Swamiji was looking to the future welfare of the world and what the world needed. Sri Ramakrishna was looking at people that were sitting in front of him who wanted to develop their spiritual life. And so he gave them what they needed. Swamiji gave what the world needed to work towards for a new and beneficial age to come to us. When once again great souls will arise in a large number. We don't see that yet, but that's because we're still in the initial stages of his message and Ramakrishna's message through him working into society. Sri Ramakrishna himself used to teach the Ashtavakra Samhita, a text of unconditional non-dualism to Swami Vivekananda, to Narendra. Narendra, the future Vivekananda, didn't want anything to do with it. He said, this is blasphemy. And Sri Ramakrishna would laughingly say, well, I don't ask you to believe it, just read it to me so that I can hear it. Because he knew that in that way it would go through Swamiji's mind, Naren's mind, and in time he would see the truth of it. And so he taught that to Swamiji and taught Swamiji how to teach the world as well. And so we can't say that Sri Ramakrishna was not a non-dualist and that Vivekananda taught something different from Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna taught him carefully with a care that he didn't give to anyone else except for Holy Mother. So Sri Ramakrishna used to often quote, a verse from the Ashtavakra Samhita. Mukta bhimani mukto hi baddho baddha bhimanyapi kim vadantiha satyayam yamati sagatir bhavet. One who thinks I am free will become free. One who thinks he is bound becomes bound. The popular saying is true. As one thinks, so one will attain. So Sri Ramakrishna would often say that one who thinks he is free indeed. One who thinks he is bound becomes bound. And then he would add, if you go on saying, I'm a sinner, then rascal, you become a sinner. So and he also would teach, tie the knowledge of non-dualism in the corner of your cloth and then do whatever you like. Would a Vishishtadvaitin teach that? No. He taught, tie the knowledge of Advaita in the corner of your cloth and then do whatever you like. Meaning that once you understand that I am Brahman and everyone is Brahman and everything is Brahman, then if you tie that in the corner of your cloth, meaning you assimilate it and you understand it, then that will guide the rest of your life. That's all that you need. That's what he meant. Tie it in the corner of your cloth, meaning make it your own, and then do whatever you like. Because if you've assimilated that, then that will guide everything that you do. So yes, he usually taught devotion, but again, that was because of the different purpose that in his teaching, the different audience that he had. So again, Sri Ramakrishna always said that your spiritual life has to be real to you. And that's why he said, it won't do to say, I'm not the body, and then you get pricked by a thorn and you say, ouch, 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 oh, there's no thorn, the thorn doesn't exist, all the while you're shaking your hand with pain. No. If you feel the thorn, if you feel pain, admit it. Don't say, oh, the thorn doesn't exist, my hand doesn't exist, and go like this. No. Learn to reinterpret things, yes, but don't be a hypocrite. And so he always wanted people, again, to practice something that they could actually assimilate and actually put into practice. And so he said, for most people who have to deal with things of the world, an attitude of being a child of God, a devotee of God, that is best. But again, with Swami Vivekananda, he taught even that idea can be supported by the non-dual truth, that I am Brahman and I am a devotee of God, but the reality is that both of us are the same reality, but I don't see that yet. And so I delight in the awareness of God and my playing with God, even though the two of us eventually will be the same reality. So Sri Ramakrishna used to plead with him. Once in the gospel it's recorded, with tears in his eyes, Sri Ramakrishna pleads to him, please promise me that you will stop reasoning. And Swamiji gave a great place to reason. No, that's because Swamiji also saw the limitations of reason and stated the limitations of reason very strongly in many places. But he saw also that before we can get to that stage where we can give up reason and go to the truth which is beyond reason, we have to use reason in order to avoid error, illusion, delusion, etc. That's why so many people, especially Westerners, or not just Westerners, non-Indians, get in trouble when they go to India looking for a guru, because they think that anyone who says I'm an illumined soul must be an illumined soul because they told me so, and they have followers, and so then they follow them and find themselves in deep trouble. So yes, we have to use reason, but once we've understood the truth through reason, through questioning, through conviction, then going on reasoning about it serves no purpose. Then hold on to it and immerse yourself in it. Identify with the truth. So that's why he said, please promise me you won't reason anymore. But again, as I said, the whole gospel is, even the gospel, which is the most devotional text on Sri Ramakrishna, even that is full of the highest Advaita. So now time is up. Let me end on the note of Sri Ramakrishna's Vijnana. He used to say that the highest state is not just jnana, where you realize the absolute, where you realize Brahman, you realize Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, and you immerse yourself in the knowledge of Brahman. That's a very high state, and that is generally considered the highest state according to the non-dualists. But Sri Ramakrishna said, no, there's a state higher than that, a state called Vijnana, special knowledge. Vijnana means jnana, which is Vishishta jnana. A special form of knowledge. That is, after you have attained to the knowledge of Brahman, then you come back, see the world again, but you see that this world is nothing but the play of Brahman. It's nothing but Brahman. There's no longer a duality between Brahman and Maya. Maya has become just the play of Brahman. That was what Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna's own teacher in non-dualism, had to learn at the hands of Sri Ramakrishna and the Divine Mother. And so Sri Ramakrishna said that that is the highest state. That is not Vishishtadvaita. Vishishtadvaita, first of all, doesn't accept the non-dual reality. There is no non-dual reality. The soul is always separate from God. It's a part of God, but only a part, and separate as a part is separate from the whole. It remains for eternity a part. But Sri Ramakrishna recognized the non-dual reality and said that after that one sees the universe again, but sees it as non-different from Brahman. So that's not seeing the universe as we see it. We see the universe, we don't see Brahman or God, we just see a material universe. The Vijnani doesn't see a material universe. They see the dance of God, the dance of Brahman. And they so see no distinction between Brahman, Ishvara, and this dance that we see. So that was Vijnana. So let me conclude just by saying that Sri Ramakrishna, as Holy Mother said, was all Advaita. He was all Advaita. But he didn't impose that on everyone. He said that if you like to think of God as separate, that's fine. Pursue God that way. He even said that there are those who, by their very temperament, they want to remain in eternal play with God. They don't want to merge into Brahman. He said that those who belong to the realm of God with form, they wouldn't take nirvikalpa samadhi, nirvana, merging in Brahman, even if you offer it to them. They wouldn't take it. They want to play with God. So that also is good. One needs to find one's own path, one's own temperament, and one's path to the fulfillment of that temperament. And in Sri Ramakrishna's non-dualism, there's room for all religious ideas, all true experiential religious ideas, not dogmas and doctrines and et cetera, which are just intellectual formulations, but experiential truths. All of them are good. And whatever makes sense to us, we can take. And the closer we get to God, then the more comprehensive our understanding will be. But even there, when we come to the realization of God, different people will seek a different end to their life of spirit, merging into Brahman, identification with Brahman, playing with God, coming back again and again and delighting in the play of God, or remaining as an enlightened personhood in order to help other souls attain to God. All of those things are possible. But it is non-dualism alone which gives us a standpoint from which we can understand the truth of all of those. Short of non-dualism, we don't have the possibility of a comprehensive vision. Only from the standpoint of Advaita, understood as Sri Ramakrishna taught it, only from that standpoint do we have a position from which we can understand the comprehensive whole and accept all. So with that, I'll close the talk. Let me give announcements, and then if there are any questions, even though time is up, I will give those. So for announcements, on Tuesday we will have the Gita class as usual at 7:30 in the evening. Not the Gita class, now it's the Upanishad class. And we're on the Kena Upanishad. So we will continue with the study of the Kena Upanishad on Tuesday at 7:30. We just began it last week. And then on Thursday, we'll continue with the study of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I haven't made the schedule for May, and so I don't have a topic yet announced for next week and following Sundays in May, but that we will get out this week. But there will be the usual service on Sunday. So, yeah. So Brahmachari Michael is giving me questions, and I'll deal with them quickly as I can, because again, time is well over. What is Shakta Advaita? Where can we study it? Yes, a good question. Shakta Advaita again means the idea of non-dualism, but that Shakti, the Divine Mother, Kali, Durga, Saraswati, Lalita, that the Divine Mother is the non-dual reality. So oftentimes we think in Hinduism of Shiva as when we think in terms of deities and the non-dual, we think of Shiva as the non-dual reality and the Divine Mother as the Shakti creating this universe. But the Shaktas, those who are primarily devoted to the Divine Mother, they see the Divine Mother as everything. She's the impersonal, she's the personal, she is the universe. Everything is that. So where you can find that, the Shakta Tantras were the sources for that philosophy, but they weren't written as philosophies, as a philosophy. They were written as instructional books on spiritual practice and written in a cryptic way that people couldn't understand without going to a teacher. So that won't do you much good. But you can find texts on Shakta Advaita. I don't know of one in particular to recommend, but if, as with anything, Google it and you'll get a beginning. So then, does any scripture have the Vijnana philosophy of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna? What is Chinmay Shyam, Chinmay Dham? So, the philosophy of Vijnana of Sri Ramakrishna, there's no scripture that teaches that, because Sri Ramakrishna taught it, and the scriptures came long ago. You can find in the scriptures hints of that, but not as a philosophy. In the Chandogya Upanishad, it says, Sarvam Kalbidam Brahma, all of this is Brahman, and other statements like that, which point towards Sri Ramakrishna's Vijnana, but there was not a development of a philosophy. That was Sri Ramakrishna's contribution. And then Chinmay Shyam, Chinmay Dham, that's a beautiful statement of of some Vaishnavas, that Shyam means Sri Krishna. And Dham means the realm of Sri Krishna, the spiritual realm of Sri Krishna, like Vaikuntha, the world of Sri Krishna. And so, or the spiritual Vrindavan as opposed to the earthly Vrindavan. And so Chinmoy Sham means Sri Krishna himself is nothing but consciousness, made of pure consciousness. Sri Krishna is himself the embodiment of pure consciousness, and his realm is pure consciousness. So it's a beautiful idea. So in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19, let's see if I can enlarge this because that's too small for me to read. No. Bahulam, let's see. Yes. So is there an indication to some kind of metaphysics that the Lord has become all? Yes, yes, of course, that's what it's saying, that Vasudevam iti, everything here is God, is Sri Krishna himself. So yes, it is pointing to that. Which is the most profound and most elaborate life story book of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna? So the most profound and elaborate is certainly what is in one translation called Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master. In another translation is called, by Swami Chaitananda, is called Sri Ramakrishna and His Divine Play. That's the most elaborate. There have been things discovered after that was written by Sri Ramakrishna's disciple, Swami Saradananda, but there's no biography that's as comprehensive as that and profound as that. And then were Shirdi Sai Baba, Mahavatar Baba, Meher Baba, and Neem Karoli Baba realized souls or acharyas or partial incarnations? Are such realized souls present today? It's believed that there are always some realized souls in the world. This is an idea which is shared with Judaism, though they don't speak of them as realized souls. They speak of them as great knowers of God, but the same basic idea, that there are always some realized souls living to keep that tradition alive. That if there were no people who had the true vision alive in the world itself would devolve into chaos. And so they are. And all of these, Shirdi Sai Baba and Meher Baba and so forth, they were at least great saints. I don't know beyond that, but I look on them as great saints. People, their devotees, sometimes look on them differently. That's fine. I'm not an authority on other saints and who they are, what their status is. But they were great, and Neem Karoli Baba, they were great saints, at least. So that's the end of the questions. And again, my appreciation for all of the greetings and so forth as well from various parts. So let me give a closing chant, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Om Madhuvatharitayate Madhuksharanti Sindhavaha Madhvirnasantoshadhihi Madhunaktamutoshasi Madhumatparthivagum Rajaha Madhudyaurastu Pita Madhumandho Vanaspatir Madhumagumastu Suryaha Madhvirgavo Bhavantunaha Om Madhu Om Madhu Om Madhu. We who seek the truth, and for all living beings, may the winds blow sweetly. May the rivers flow sweetly. May the herbs yield us sweetness. Sweet be the night and the break of day. Sweet be the very dust of the earth. May the heavens pour down sweetness upon us. May the trees, lords of the forest, bear us sweetness. May the sun shed its sweetness upon us. May the directions pour forth sweetness. Om, sweetness, sweetness, sweetness. Hello, Suroj. Namaskar. Oh, okay. Yeah, you can take that to him. Yeah, you can take them both. Thanks. So, hello, Jiten. I didn't get to say hello to you. I was afraid you'd disappear. Oh, I thought we. Oh, I thought you were in the bathroom. I started because I sat here a long time. I started to tell him to go look for you, but then I thought, well, if it's in the bathroom, he'll come when he can. So, if I'd known you were there, I would have called for you. Ah, ah, this is the other Upanishads, yes. Oh, was it any better?